Guys, Frontwoods Farmer, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do something a little bit fun. I got me and my son working today, and we're actually going to, we bought a lathe like this. I bought him this little lathe. I mean, it's not a kid's toy, but what we're gonna do with it is we're gonna make it so we can bring it to all the hit and miss like antique engine shows and things. I wanted to have something a little different. I'm gonna flip around the camera. I'm gonna show you guys like what we're gonna do today. So all he's really doing right now is he's gonna get a layout. Why don't you tell him what you're doing? What are we doing?
Chalking it.
Yeah, what's that called? Tracing it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're tracing it out. That's good enough. We're tracing this out. You get this side real good like Dad did? Okay. We're gonna trace this out. That's gonna tell us where to grind. And this lathe got a real thick metal base. Now this was somebody's build. They never finished. You can tell the carriage is real chintzy. So we're gonna actually redesign that carriage most likely, or build off of it, make it better. And we're gonna make this lathe spin. It's a neat little lathe that I picked up cheap out of like Canton, Ohio. I couldn't remember the exact town. I got him this for like, I think it was only a few bucks, maybe like $5. And this is kind of like a real old engine. Let's take a look, see what kind it is. Maybe you guys could see the tag. We have so many. I think it's a Briggs Type Y. I'm not real sure. Engine. So we're going to get the layout going. I'm going to do some grinding. He's going to do some grinding. And we'll get back to you.
This is where we're going to trace it and grind it and clean it off and weld it.
So he's just grinding out where we need the weld. Good, you can keep grinding. I'll talk loud. And he's just getting acquainted with the grinder. And now obviously he has his safety glasses, his gloves and everything, because he does not want to get hurt. And we're gonna grind out this whole tracing here. This is where I started. And you see how this is real porous, they call it? That means there's divots and dips in the metal, so it's not even. So I'm gonna let him keep working, and I'm gonna go over here and show you the welder we're gonna use. I have multiple welders. That's just a standard tombstone style, they call it, buzz box arc welder. And we're gonna use a stick weld, which can go through dirt while you weld. A MIG weld makes it look nice, but it's gotta be clean, and this isn't the cleanest metal. So we're gonna get back to it, and I'll bring you back when we start welding the base to the cart. We can get it. Like I said it before, this is real porous. There's a lot of pits in this steel, but that's why we're choosing to stick weld it over MIG welding or TIG welding, because the metal in those two welds really have to be clean. So I'm gonna bring out the stick welder, and we're gonna get this welded up. All right, so we're all set up, ready to weld. One thing I forgot to tell you, you gotta obviously put your ground while you're welding. Be careful when you're welding, you know, hot sparks, they can fly everywhere. Keep it away from gas tanks, things like that. We're gonna be welding over here first. We centered everything, found our center on our cart, and then we found our center here, and we just lined up the two centers. That way our lathe center, we pushed it back 1.5 inches because there is a T-slot ground in that base plate. So I'm thinking we can make a real nice sturdy carriage and hold it in these two T-slots later on. So we got everything measured out, and we're gonna start welding. We got some 70-14, I believe that's 1/8 inch, it's probably about 3/32 rod. We got our welder set, and again, this is like a just a buzz box, they call it. Cheap welder, you can get them for $50 to $150. Get started in welding fairly reasonable these days. So I'm gonna start welding this base onto the cart. All right, so I pretty much got all the welding done. I made a lot of root passes, and I'm gonna say this, the welds turned out acceptable. I mean, I'm not thrilled, but I'm not dissatisfied with them. It's definitely gonna hold. I had some issues in some spots, and I'll tell you why. Anytime you're adapting like a tool steel to a filthy, dirty, old, maybe 70-year-old steel, it really is difficult. Basically what you gotta do is you gotta do so many root passes under there and build up and get contact in one piece, then do root passes, get built up in the next piece, and then I kind of fillet those two welds together, and it seems to hold pretty good. I'm not a certified welder, but I do a pretty decent job, and it's good enough for this build. So now we're gonna figure out a way we can mount that motor on there and change these gears. So it's gonna get a little. So what we're gonna end up going with is we gotta figure out a way to move the motor in and out and also tension it. And I thought I had another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 step pulley that came with this, but we can't seem to find it. So what I'm gonna end up doing is using this old Reeves Vice base. It's gonna add even more character to this build, and try to mount this so we can change the belts with this wheel, because we want a quicker disconnect to shut the lathe off in case anything would go wrong. This has a shut off for the motor, but I want something that's going to disconnect that speed right now in case something would happen. Mount this here with a long belt, which isn't ideal because of the workspace, but again, this is more for show. And I found this nice big giant pulley, and I'm going to use it for a on and off for like a clutch basically. It's an idler, which that's pretty nice too, because you could just cut the power right away to it. What I'm doing right now is I got to get this fuel line out of here, take this off the base. I'm also going to take the motor off the base so I could see how I can mount it, and I'm probably going to have to move the fuel tank and make something separate to mount this fuel tank to. It's got to stay with the engine. We got the vise where we wanted it. We're going to use that for this axis here to where we're squared up with the belt, and then we'll actually have an idler for a clutch system. And then you see he just put the oil in the holes where I pre-drilled, where we're going to set this cross slide vise. Well, one important thing when you're drilling holes like this, now you're starting a pilot hole and then stepping up to a bigger hole, but the second thing you want to remember is don't keep feeding that oil in that hole while you're drilling. A lot of people make that mistake and they hard surface the steel and make it basically hardened, and then you can't drill through it. So take your drill out every once in a while and just lubricate the drill. You want to hard face this. You don't want to hard surface what you're drilling. So that's just the tip. I'm going to finish drilling these out, step up the holes, and we're going to bolt that on.
It's a wall.
So we'll have to see if our holes line up, and then we're gonna have to find some bolts to mount this on. Then we'll get to, oh yeah, that's a beautiful thing. Perfect. So we'll get some bolts, get this mounted, then we'll work on building these, I guess you call them stilts, this engine. That engine's not flat underneath, I'll show you guys. So we're gonna have to raise it up, weld these on, and then we'll drill these like we did those. But we're gonna tap these with a tap and run a bolt in the right way so we can take that engine on and off if ever need be. All right, we got all our holes drilled, found some bolts, just tightening them up. One thing you do have to worry about when you have these cast bases like this, these ears will just crack off if this isn't squared up and flat to this surface. So one thing you could do is just snug them up The right thing to do is to shim this so it sits flat and then snug it. Because these ears, if there's no support under them, will break off. But I don't think we're gonna have much trouble with it. But it's starting to actually come together and look like something now. So I'm gonna finish tightening these bolts up, and then we can go and see the next step we do for mounting the motor on. So the next step is to put this motor on. And I promised you guys I'd show you the bottom of this motor. So here it is. And this is where this comes down. And this is even kind of strange. I've never seen a crankcase like this. So I'm gonna put these two flat spots on these rails. And to do that, it's gonna be a little tricky. I kind of mocked it up with one. I'm actually gonna have to build this too high. That's how much clearance that needs near the flywheel. So I'm gonna cut these down to size to the base of the motor. And then whatever's left lengthwise on each of these, because I have two of them, I'm just gonna weld it here. And then we'll drill them and then we'll tap those. So the motor and the vise will be removable.
Like this.
Exactly. It's a little hard to visualize all this, so you guys can kind of start seeing what I'm going to do. This is going to lift this off of this vise base, like I said, and then what I'm going to end up doing is drilling out, like they did, a pattern for my motor, and then I'm going to drill that out underneath of the stock here, drill a hole like this, and then I'm going to tap it. Now, of course, that has to be smaller. That way I could run a bolt directly down into the base, and it'll tighten this on. And then I will drill these out, tap these, and we'll be able to bolt all this together. That way, if you need to either repurpose this or something doesn't actually go right, see, this isn't moving, this is welded. I can grind that off and move it, but it's a lot more difficult. Whenever you're doing something like this, you want to be able to unbolt it around everything you're doing, because if this isn't squared up with this, I can unbolt it and I can move things to where if it's all welded, that's it. You got to cut it off and keep redoing it. So when you run into errors, it's harder to fix. So I'm going to go ahead, get these other two drilled out. I'm going to call it a wrap today. I appreciate you guys watching the channel. This is part one of building our home built lathe. Thanks for watching. Good time to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification next to the subscribe button. You'll get all my new videos. We do stuff like this on the channel all the time. Thanks for watching part one, guys.